Just to fill you in, Puketeraki Kāhui. So we're based in Rangiora. Hi, Carolyn. I know you're sitting at Rangiora High School. I know how much they're valuing your work that you're doing. And we are 18 schools, 14 plus ECEs, obviously Rangiora High School, 260 plus teachers, 5,500 students. We have 7 across school leads, 32 within school leads, and 11 learning support coordinators. So collectively, we're reasonably large. We're not the largest, but we're one of the largest. Our vision is to create a community of learning around the Rangiora area with authentic, engaging curriculum that meets the needs of all our students. So when Stephen asked me to talk about collaboration, examples of where our Kāhui has collaborated well, obviously, and then started thinking about what I could share with you. So I guess one of the things that immediately springs to mind is our Āhuatanga whakaaro, which is a document we created over 2 years in total. It was a collaboration between tamariki, kaiako and whānau across all of those communities. And from that, we have created this document which defines for us our valued learner outcomes. It started as an attempt to describe what attributes students have that supported them across the key transition points across our Kāhui, but has grown into something that is much greater than that. Last year, we also worked as a group of Tumuaki to develop some language acquisition plans as part of working through the iOS process. And we built 3 documents together as principles that defined language acquisition plans for tamariki, community and for staff. And this year that work's being rolled out by very passionate te reo, we're calling them our te reo champions, to get those language acquisition plans running in schools. We've also run a series of groups. Bringing 260 plus teachers together at any one time is a bit of a challenge, as you can imagine. And we've come through a process of what we called our network groups, which were totally self-selected groups. Teachers suggested things that they would like to come together to work on, and we allowed that process to run for kind of 2 years, giving teachers a chance to get into each other's spaces, but also to have some cross-sector conversations. And this year, I always say, like, our Kāhui is growing up. So this year, a little bit more directed, and the Kāhui innovation groups are around our strategic goals and achievement challenges. Right from the beginning, we've run a teacher-only day. Last year, we changed it to a staff-only day. So not only 260 plus teachers, but support staff, admin staff, caretakers and cleaners. And we had a massive day based at Rangiora High School. But that sense of building teams has been a really big part of what we've done right from the beginning. And so they were definitely a group that we needed to be thinking about supporting. Our management and leadership structures are all around teams and around working collaboratively together. We also are starting to build some cross-Kāhui relationships and systems and structures, but we have very strong cross-sector collaborations across ECE and primary and secondary. We have a very close relationship with our Ministry of Education as well, and with our RTLB cluster managers and our Ministry Learning Support team. I've put a link on this to our Puketeraki website. So 3 years ago, we had some PLD, and one of the PLD strands was around collaboration. And so we've put some of the work that we did in that time on our website. So you're welcome to have a look at that if you like. And we also, I guess, think about some of the collaborations that have happened and hasn't actually been about us. We've provided some opportunities for people to come together to collaborate, and from that, there's been lots of other spin-off collaborative things that have happened. So I guess just we've provided some room and some opportunity for formal and informal collaborations to happen. If you go on. So Stephen asked me to think about, I guess, some of the key things that are important about collaboration and maybe some of the myths. So I guess what we've learned is this would be the first thing. People say collaboration is easy. So you just bring people together and give them something to do, right? That's collaboration. Well, no, it's hard, it's messy. And actually, if it's going to be successful, what we've discovered is it needs to be meaningful, it needs to be authentic, it needs to be agentic, and I call it heart work. So it has to really matter. So yeah, next slide. So collaboration is easy. No, that myth is definitely busted for us. The next one was that everyone wants to do it, right? I see across my desk every day there would be at least 3 emails of people offering to tell you what collaboration is, to show you how to do it, and to tell you how great it is. But I guess I go back to that. If it's going to work, then it has to be meaningful, it has to be authentic, and it has to be hard work. People have to really connect with the purpose, and they have to be able to describe why it matters so much. Because why would you not want to work hard, be challenged, have your biases and deficit thinking exposed? Because all of those things happen when you collaborate. This one is great. We talk about this all the time. So what do you mean the answer doesn't exist yet? Someone must know. And often when we're collaborating, the absolute opposite is true. We talk about no place for the voluntold, or the what's in it for me. So the people who come because their principal told them they had to and they don't really know why they're there, or the people that come wanting to take something away rather than to contribute something. So not everyone can collaborate on this thing at this time. It doesn't mean they can't collaborate, it just means that that particular thing or at that particular time. We've had experiences of all of those things, especially the voluntold. That's a really common one. My principal said I had to come, I don't really know why I'm here. And that being really clear about who we should be collaborating with, how and for what purpose. So I noticed in the chat some people had put a lot of those things in there, and so that's just kind of confirming that as well. Yep, so myth busted, definitely not everybody wants to do it, not everybody's designed to do it. Okay, collaboration makes everything easy. So I've heard this lots, you know, if we collaborate there'll be more people, less work and less time. But again, I come back to, is it meaningful, authentic heart work? Can everybody honestly put their hand on their heart and say why it matters so much, the work that they're doing? Our Kāhui talks about what can we do better together than alone? And so I always say, you know, what can we do better together than alone? Because if we can do it better alone, then we should be. So actually, from a Kāhui perspective, there are schools that are doing things individually. There are schools who are working with buddy schools or in small clusters together on non-Kāhui goals. And then we have shared work that matters a lot to the Kāhui because of the process we've gone through for identifying what work counts, what matters the most. And that's the work that we can do better together. So, yeah, another myth busted. My favourite. So I hear this a lot because our Kāhui is so big. They say it must be so hard to do things. It must be really hard to collaborate. I always flip that around and go, because we're so big, look at all the stuff we can do. Because I don't think that it is about numbers. I also don't think it's about a leader. So a group can't work with too many people without a leader, right? Yeah, I guess you've probably heard that too. But actually, that bottom line about it's about what you bring, not what you take away. That has been, and I've written there, a long journey of discovery for us, especially, first of all, we had to win the hearts and minds of principals. They had to understand that it's not about what you bring, it is about what you bring, it's not about what you take away. And then to try and convince the hearts and minds of 260 plus teachers. And teachers have grown up going to things to get stuff. Like, that's what we've taught them to do. You go to something, you get stuff, and you perhaps bring it back to share with other people, more stuff. So actually getting them to understand that whole mind shift, get a mind shift around how they work together has been quite a long journey, and we're still on it in many cases. For collaboration to work, it's not about the number of people, it's not about the leader, it's about the collaborative tools, the design structures, and the facilitation. And I saw all those things popping up in the chat. So we've been able to partner with a PLD provider who've helped us to grow our capacity right across all the different layers in our Kāhui ako, so that it doesn't matter which team is working, they're supported by a group of a resource bank of tools and structures and systems and facilitation skills that help them to get the mahi done. So yeah, another myth busted. So what the final slide, kind of thinking about, well, what has worked really well for us? Obviously that finding meaningful, authentic heart work that people are prepared to come together to collaborate on, work that really matters. And our āhuatanga whaiaro is a really good example of that. A really strong community collaboration, and it was a need that had been identified through collaborative inquiry. So our ASLs ran collaborative inquiries right across our Kāhui ako. Being focused, dogged, one would say, about keeping the main thing, and avoiding all the noise. Leading a Kāhui ako is kind of, that's become a really important job for me to do. I see there's a lot of noise about Kāhui, and so for me to try and make sure that I keep the main thing, when we're working together, collaborating together, that's also really important. We do that by supporting common communications. We tell our story, we have our narrative, we share information through board reporting, community newsletters. Our structures help with that. So we have a leadership team, a management team. Our management team is every principal, ECE manager, RTLB manager, ministry, mana whenua, mana ake, like Uncle Tom Cobley, and all sit at our management team table. Everyone has an equal voice and everyone participates, and it works for us. I talked about building the facilitation skills across the breadth and depth of the Kāhui. That's been really important, the tools, skills and knowledge to work in collaborative ways. And I guess the common component around that has been our RFPLD applications. We've made sure that that's layered in there. And providing time and giving mana, I saw that on the chat as well, giving mana to the mahi, and acknowledging people for their contributions. So all of our principals agree before a year starts on the staff release components that are required. They align their own school goals and budgets, and we have accumulated, we call it the bribe money, probably not politically correct, but the $1,000 every school got when they joined a Kāhui. We've combined that right from the beginning, and that's given us a pool of money, and we share that and make that available to schools to use, and also our ECEs who don't have access to any support through Kāhui ako. We put our money where our mouth is, literally, but also figuratively. And I guess we're willing to share our mahi, like I am today. Not my favourite thing to be doing this, but we do it, and we are extremely grateful to others who also do it. We belong to the Canterbury Kāhui ako network. We enjoy those opportunities. Cheryl calls us your groupies, but it's because we get such value from those opportunities to share. So they've created new opportunities for us as a Kāhui to work with others on work that really matters. So that's my attempt at telling you about how we collaborate, some of the myths that that we've managed to bust over the years. Yeah, so kia ora koutou.
It's my great privilege now to be able to welcome a good friend and a colleague I've worked with over many years. In fact, he's taught with me, and he's taught with my father. In fact, he's a current world record holder for the longest teachathon I think the time was 28 hours or 32 hours. Taught chemistry non-stop for 32 hours. One of his claims to fame. But Murray's Tumuaki from Tawa College, and just him and his team have done some groundbreaking work up there, looking before kahiakos, but also been a really strong proponent to challenging the voices that need to be challenged. And I love the way that the gentle nature, but the forceful nature he challenges, and not afraid to ask the hard questions. And we want to thank you, Murray, for taking time out of your sabbatical. I know you are in the bustling metropolis of Te Anau at the moment, and doing some visits around different places in the country, but also just taking some well-needed time out. And so we do take as a massive privilege that you are here today, and looking forward to you just sharing a bit of an interim thought on some of your ideas, findings, what you've noticed. And I'm just, before I hand to you, I'm going to share I'm going to be sharing Murray's PowerPoint with you, and let me just do that correctly. And I just want to share the first screen, and then I'll hand to Murray. But the first screen here you'll see is something I stole off a friend recently. She says you can't read the label from the inside the jar. And I think so often in schools we're inside jars, and we need people on the outside to look at us and go, what are we going to notice? And I think what Murray's going to share will be us looking back at ourselves and sharing some of the observations he's noticed and seen. So I really appreciate your time, Murray, and hand over to you to be able to share. Kia ora, Murray.
Kia ora, and thank you, Greg, for that introduction. Ko rangatui toko moonga, ko Kinaparu toko awa, ko Hereford toko waka, ko Tawa College toko kura, ko Murray Lucas toko ingoa. It's a real pleasure to speak. First of all, can I just thank Sharon for her presentation? A couple of things that I really thought were important is, to me, collaboration means that everybody through the organisation has a voice, and you certainly brought that out, and I think that was really important. And the other thing that to me is really important is the fact that I think for a kahiako to be successful, it does require a periodic and temporary suppression of the ego at times, and the ones that work best are the ones where they are not so much full of ego, but really wanting the better good. So what I've done is I've been looking at collaborative learning in the context of kahuiako or community learning as part of my sabbatical. I would have to say that it'd be fair to say that in some cases things haven't been as good as they should be, particularly in terms of its setup with the framework, the design, remuneration and resourcing. But nevertheless, I believe the concept is an admirable one, and when you hear it working so well as we've just heard, and it encourages collaboration, I believe it is really important. I want to just share with you some of the really positive and inspirational things that I've seen through my time. So far, I've been seeing kahiako in Wellington, Kapiti Coast, Manawatu, Marlborough, Nelson, and Southland. So, and I've got Christchurch to come next week. But the first thing was managing pathways, which are really important. And it was really great to hear Sharon talked about ECE to pathways to primary. Apart from one kahuiako, this is the first time I've heard of the involvement of ECE. Generally, the funding has been the issue. The one outlier was, in fact, the Porua East kahuiako, who have felt that unless they can get that transition right from early childhood education to the beginning of their primary school, they're never going to get it right for their students through their journey. And so they've actually got one of their 3 across school leaders as an ECE person. And it was really good to see the effort that's been involved in that. However, I've seen also some excellent stuff in terms of pathways from particularly those areas from year 6 to year 7, depending on whether it's a country school, or from year 8 to year 9. And a couple of them are worthwhile noting. One is where basically the school of origin as such, if a student, like a Samoan group of students, is really struggling at a primary school, they ring up the secondary school and ask if there's anybody at the secondary school who went to their school who's Samoan that would be willing to come down and inspire and help. And that's worked really, really effectively. And there's been some really good synergy about that. And it's been great for the primary teachers to be able to just check and be part of the journey of that person right through to when they leave at year 13. The other thing that has been most impressive, and it was Waimea College, I hadn't thought about this, we generally try and support the year 9s and year 10s at Tawa by using year 13 students who are trained and develop it that way. Waimea basically argued we want them to be on the journey for longer than 1 year, so they work with year 11 students at their school and support students as they come into school. So they've got the advantage of those extra years, which was something that is simple but quite challenging and helpful. One of the really good things that I saw was a really good situation around introducing science labs at a college level to students from year 1 to year 8 with their parents. And they had a couple of science evenings where students came up with their parents in the evening between 6:30 and 8, worked with year 9 and 10 students and science staff from the secondary school, and got a taste of science and being part of the whiz-bang of it all. It was helped that the school had an observatory as well, so that they were able to do some astronomy as well. And that was a really good example, again, of some critical working from across the transitions and making people aware of what was ahead of them as well on the pathway. One of the other things that's been really good, and I liked what Sharon mentioned about Argentic, and this is from our own Tawa one, but I think it's fairly important. We have our Māori Student Council that goes from year 4 right through to year 11, and that gives advice to the principals and the staff about what works for Māori students. And they have suggested some really positive initiatives. It's resulted in the Kia Rahi tournament, where secondary and intermediate kids coach primary, and then we have a big celebration at the end of the year. And there are numerous other initiatives that they are suggesting that are really helpful. So students too can have a voice within that Kāhui Ako agreement. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the network and the opportunity to attend training events. And can I just say, networking, and this message came across from nearly every Kāhui Ako that I went to, was that it's as much the informal stuff at the conversations that are transformative as often the keynote addresses and also the workshops. I would have said of the 10 that I've attended, 7 have had teacher-only days. 4 were at the beginning of the year, and 1 in Blenheim was brave and bold enough to actually invite people from Kaikoura schools right through to Rye Valley schools, which was quite astonishing. Most of them have had themes. I like the idea that in some cases, their workshops involved going horizontal, that is primary to primary, secondary to secondary, or tertiary, or the other one vertical from primary to secondary, so that there was a range of different opportunities available to that. I've been able to participate in 2 of these and be part of the planning for a 3rd teacher-only day. The first one was at Tawa College, where we worked with the Tawa Kāhui Ako to have presentations from all the different schools on restorative practice and learning a common language, obviously age appropriate, of how we addressed one another address both teacher to student, but also teacher to teacher, because that is often a challenge that we don't model it as well as we should. And that was a key collaboration that took a lot of practice to get our bookmark right. So all staff know a way of gently drawing to the attention a shortcoming, perhaps, in a fellow staff person. One particular, and another of these events was one by the Porora East Cluster that I was fortunate enough to attend. One of the things that I really appreciated was attending a workshop which was run by 4 different teachers from contributing schools in the Porora East Cluster, dealing with trauma, students facing trauma. And they looked at it from a Maori viewpoint, from a Samoan viewpoint, from a Tokelauan viewpoint, and from a people immigrating into the country viewpoint, refugee one. And it was just stunning. And as the people that were there was no way that any individual school could have provided that level of input and value that could be provided by that contribution. And it was incredibly valuable. And I learned a hell of a lot about, particularly dealing with some of our Tokelauan students that I wish I'd learnt many times before. A number of the kuiakos were relating to Maori iwi stories. And it was interesting that about 3 or 4 kahuiakos have got a specialist Maori teacher that visits all the schools. Some even have a kapahaka instructor that's common to both so that nobody misses out. The next thing is common approach to assessment. And I think a lot of kuiakos are struggling a bit to find some way of standardising assessment as a removal of national standards occurred. But in the Paratahi kuiaka, which is in Blenheim, I was really impressed that they've developed their own method of assessment called the Paratahi value. I think they call them literacy and numeracy scores. And what they do is they just measure it by the curriculum, and you're either above, below, or on a par. What they've also done is we're allocated within school teachers, but they've held back about 7 of those. They keep the results only for the schools that get it. That's the 3 principals that are co-principals. But then they also give the extra resourcing of within school teachers to the ones that have a higher number below what's occurring, because they actually believe that it's really important for Blenheim, not just for our individual schools, for students' achievement to improve. And that was incredibly, I was incredibly moved and impressed by that. Just a couple of other points, because I can see 15 minutes is running up. The development of local curriculum has been interesting. I've been a little bit surprised with all this climate change that environment hasn't been as stronger emphasis. 2 particularly schools stand out there. Waimea, the Waimea cluster, work with the Tasman District Council with regards to the Waimea estuary, and that has been absolutely stunning. And to hear kids talk about how they're working and have seen a banded rail chip just emerge was quite moving and quite impressive. Their ability to know which native plants, such as ako to plant in dry areas, was also good. And the excitement and the pride of doing something that was making a difference for our world was something to really take on board. Nayland cluster have taken advantage of a very insightful Ministry of Education Science advisor years ago, who's developed up a bandicoot region into various schools, and they all deal with trapping and track work and tree planting in those areas. And that, again, was an exciting initiative. Most of the other local curriculum were local history, the iwi stories getting some understanding. And my naivety, I only thought there was Ngāi Tahu in the top of the South Island, but there are in fact 8 different iwis, and each of them needed a voice. Finally, the last thing that I want to just talk about, because I've got 1 minute, health and wellbeing. It was interesting, the one para-education organisation that was positively regarded by all was the New Zealand Council of Education Research, but many schools are looking for a way of measuring health and wellbeing that gives them an idea of how they're progressing in their Kāhui ako, and that's something I'd like to explore further. I was part of a planning of a manaaki evening for the health and wellbeing of a Kāhui ako community, where they had 6 speakers speaking about such matters as pornography, as online good behaviour, in terms of depression, in terms of building up resilience. And we had these keynote speakers. They were put onto the Manaaki website, and it was just an inspiring evening. But that was taken as much by the community in the end as the educators, because I'm a passionate believer that educators can't do all the stuff with health and wellbeing, and it needs to be in the community. So I've run over time, so I'll leave it there.
That's fine. Thanks very much, Murray. Thanks for your thoughts and what you've noticed and seen around the space, because I think it's often we see our own aspects. You mentioned some concerns when I was talking to you last night. Do you want to just take a moment to share with some of your thoughts or questions that come up?
Yeah, I think the concerns were, and Sharon nailed it pretty well. One of the things was that too many Kāhui ako try too many whauki, and it basically gets diluted, and there's not the reinforcement on the 1 or 2 whauki that are needed. So that was one thing that came about. One other concern that I've got is that we're all duplicating stuff that would be really valuable, like, for instance, websites. I saw an outstanding website led by an assistant principal at Wellington High School, and that I just thought of our person designing the website. They would have been helped by a template that they could have used and adapted to their environment. And if someone within the Ministry of Education could start developing resources that could then be localised, I think that would save a lot of time and a lot of effort. I also felt that the information on education counts. I've used a lot of that for my sabbatical, but it's erratic and it has some strengths in some areas, but weaknesses in other areas. And that, I think, if that was well updated, that would be incredibly helpful for everyone. And the remuneration of within school roles is a little bit out of sync. The other concern I've got is the application forms are very clunky, take a lot of time, and that's come through loud and clear all the time. It was done from School Trustees Association, but so there's been a bit of diffusion about the whole thing. And I guess I would like to, in the end, make a plea for some greater flexibility at times rather than just relying on a fairly hard and fast rules. So that's a very quick summary of that.